Hi everyone. Today we're going to be talking about note-taking. So note-taking is a very important part of university, and everyone has their own style of note-taking, which is completely okay because note-taking is very subjective to your own style of learning. However, we do have a few tips and tricks that everyone can use to learn how to take good notes, and we have a few different methods that we like to use that we're going to be sharing with you today. So, essentially, what is efficient note-taking? Efficient note-taking will allow you to 1. Locate the information you need to locate, 2. Learn the information you need to learn, and 3. Review the information that you need to review. Essentially, if you are taking efficient notes, you should be able to get everything down either on paper or on your laptop and then be able to easily review it when it comes time for the final exam. So, the first question we always get asked is, okay, but how do I do that? I don't know what to put down. So we have a few tricks for that as well. The first is to refer to the visual aid. Often your professor will have some sort of visual aid to help them with their lecture, whether this is the good old-fashioned PowerPoint or the chalk and talk technique where professors will write stuff on the board as they lecture. Often, what you'll find in these visual aids is the main and subpoints of the lecture. So for example, if we have a PowerPoint, the main point will often be the title of the slide, and the subpoints and details will be written inside the slide itself. If your professor prefers to use the blackboard, often you'll find that they write key terms or important terms on the blackboard. If your professor likes to write daily outlines, either on their PowerPoint or on the blackboard, these are very useful because they tell you exactly how the lecture will be separated in main points. It's often useful to write down these outlines. Of course, if your professor is using a PowerPoint and does post them on Brightspace, you don't want to just focus on the PowerPoint and ignore what they're saying, because often they will say additional information to what's written on the PowerPoint. It's best to listen to your professor, write down the main points, and go based on what they're saying. If you feel like you've missed something, you can always go back to Brightspace and look at the PowerPoint there. Next, what you want to do is listen for verbal cues. Professors will often repeat or put emphasis on things that are important, certain subjects that might show up on the final exam or that are main parts of the lecture. Let's take an example. If your professor is talking about the Irish potato famine of the 1840s, they will often repeat the word potato. They will often put emphasis on the way that the lack of potatoes led to this famine and caused millions of people to die of starvation. They're going to say potatoes so often they're going to sound like Samwise Gamgee in Lord of the Rings. So if your professor often repeats something, or if he's constantly talking about something, you might want to write that down as well. Phrases such as, this is important, this will be on the exam, you should remember that, or even, this occurs as a result of, announce important information that you would want to write down. Lastly, you want to be selective, brief, and clear. You really can't write everything down unless you're some form of robot that writes a mile a minute. There's no way that you can write everything down, and honestly, you really shouldn't. You should try to make sure that you take in what information you find important and put it in your own words. To write faster, you can use a system of abbreviations that you create for yourself. And really, you want to be as clear as you can. You don't want to get lost when it comes time to review your notes for your final exam. So, we also have a few little tricks on taking notes themselves. So the first thing you can do is use a highlight or color code technique, which helps you find related information easier and improves overall organization. Some students prefer to use numbers and letters. That's also completely fine. What this does, it helps you when it comes time to rereading. When you read the text for the second or third time, it really helps you read the text diagonally, which saves time and helps you focus on the most important information. So now comes time to the big decision. Am I going to use my laptop or am I going to use a notebook? Everyone has their own personal preference. It really depends on what you're more comfortable with. Some students like to use notebooks for certain classes and laptops for others. It's completely up to you. So each of them have their pros and cons. Laptops makes you take notes faster. You can write about 500 words in 15 minutes. But unfortunately, you retain less information because you're often just writing verbatim what your professor has said. You can also become easily distracted by social media. You can also use notebooks. Of course, notebooks you write a little slower, so about 300 words in 15 minutes, but you do retain a lot more information because you're putting the information in your own words. It's a lot easier to remember what you wrote down than what somebody said to you. So now that you have a good idea of what you need to write down, how you want to write things down, I'm going to share with you 3 note-taking methods that we like to use here. The outline method, the mapping method, and the Cornell method. First of these is the outline method. So the way this looks is a little bit like bullet points on Word. So the first thing you'll have is your main topic. And then what you'll have underneath that, with a little tab on the end and another bullet point, you'll have your subtopic. Underneath your subtopic, tabbed once again, you'll have details about that subtopic. So really what this is, it's a tabulated form of organizing your information so that you see exactly what fits underneath each other using this tabulated system. So if we take our example of the potatoes and apply it to this method once more, you'd have the main topic be the Irish potato famine. Then your subtopic would be lack of potatoes, and then one of your details could be the disease that wiped out the potatoes. This method is great for analytical learners, people who like to have a clear view of what everything is related to. The outline method does have its downsides. It works a little bit less well when it comes to really fast-paced lectures because you're spending time organizing your notes while you're writing them, so you can lose a little bit of information in fast-paced lectures. A good upside of it, however, is since you're organizing your notes as you're writing them, you don't really have to spend time after class making sense of what you wrote. It's already very well organized for you. The next method is called the mapping method. So what this is you create a spider web of information. You'd have your main point in the middle, and then with branches going off from that main point, you'd have subpoints. Again, from those subpoints, you'd have branches going off, and you'd have details about those subpoints. So what this creates is a visual map of your information. Again, we take the Irish potato famine. So in the square in the middle, you would have Irish potato famine. Branching off from that, you would have lack of potatoes, and then your details, which would be the disease which killed the potatoes. So this is, of course, great for visual learners, people who like to have their information very visually presented. The mapping method is also rather organized, but you might want to review it every few days just to make sure that you remember what your map is talking about, so that you don't lose track of what this map means. The mapping method is a little bit harder to use on a laptop just because you'd have to create a template, and the template varies from lecture to lecture, and it is a lot easier to do on a notebook, but of course it's completely up to you. Lastly, we have the Cornell method. So what this is it's great for analytical and visual learners. Essentially, you have a box, and it's separated into 3 different sections. The main section is your notes section. And the reason this is so cool is because you can write your notes either using the mapping method, the outline method, or however. You can just write your notes the way you want to inside that note box. Then right to the left of that note box, you have the key terms box. So here you can write key terms that you found very important, something your professor might have written down. Or you can write questions that you want to ask and don't want to forget. You can write little ideas that you had. Anything that really you want to reflect on later, you can write in that little box. Then at the bottom, you have a summary box. So what this is once the lecture is over, you reread your notes and you write down a 1 to 2 line summary of what that lecture was about. So this is really useful when it comes time to reviewing your notes when it comes to the final exam, because in 2 lines you know exactly what your notes are about, and you can go using the key terms to figure out what's important and what you need to study. Of course, this means that you need to spend about 2 to 5 minutes after class rereading your notes and writing down a summary. But it is still quite useful, and you can use it rather easily on a laptop or in a notebook. So those are the three methods that we recommend: the outline method, the mapping method, and the Cornell method. We recommend that you try them all and figure out which one you're more comfortable with, but if you know immediately which one you want to use, try it out. If it doesn't work, try another one. That's really how note-taking works. So today we've given you a few tips and tricks on efficient note-taking in university, and I hope this was useful to you.